spaces, things exist. And the lines that form the network of your mind. Behind the retinas of imagination are the particles and peripherals that made you who you are. Turn off, shut your eyes, and listen. Dispatches from outside the box.
Hello, everyone. Tonight on Dispatches, we're going to be talking about a world of airships, top hats, and brass goggles. A world steeped in futuristic antiques and the fruit of an unimagined tomorrow. To some, it is the future of yesteryear, while to others, it means goths discovered the color brown. Of course, I'm talking about steampunk, and I welcome you to join us as we delve into this bygone world that is happening right now. I'm your host, independent artist and mad scribbler, C Michael Lanning. Welcome, everybody. Of course, we don't have our one of our co-hosts, the Steamy Stone Abdullah, tonight, but we do have our other co-host, Mr. Rocket Randy Zimmerman. Introduce yourself, Randy.
Rocket Randy. There we go. Yeah. Hey, everybody. I'm Randy Zimmerman. I'm a longtime alternative and independent comics creator, producer, publisher. You name it, I've probably done it in the industry at one point or another. I've been in the alternative and independent market for decades and done a lot of stuff. Retailed for over 10 years. In fact, I used to work at Yesteryears for about 5 years. That's the name of the comic shop that actually it's the name of the comic shop I met my wife in, to tell you the truth. But coordinated conventions for over 10 years, did all sorts of stuff, know all sorts of things. So happy to be here. I also do the Zimcast. It's on Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. here on the Raging 2 Network, and the Sunday Funnies, which is on Sunday morning, where we talk about the fun and lighthearted side of comics and the passions that we love. Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time.
All right, excellent. And of course, we also have our guest with us. Speaking of, I guess you're kind of our guest co-host tonight, Brian. We don't have Stone. You kind of dropped in on us. Tell us about yourself, sir.
Well, unaccustomed as I am to talking about myself, I'm Brian K. Morris, independent publisher, freelance writer, editor of comics and novels, award-winning playwright, Facebook famous YouTuber, and former mortician's assistant. And I used to work in comic shops. Currently, I am publisher of stuff like this and lots of books. And we'll be talking about this later. And I work for other people. And other than that, I don't do a darn thing. I just sit around the house all day and eat bonbons like Peg Bundy and watch TV.
The life, right?
And I edited that book, too.
You did.
Yes, I did. You wrote the introduction.
I did. I wrote it before I fell asleep.
Randy said, all this surprise, you're a co-host, no pressure.
Yeah.
So, Steph, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us who you are.
I am Steph Cannon. I'm one half of Insymmetry Creations with the other guy with the matching shirt in this show here. We have a steampunk title that we do. It's called Heirs of Isildur. We actually just successfully funded and completed our Kickstarter for the next story arc for that, which is probably what we're going to be talking about a lot tonight. It's called The Perilous Prospects. We are in the midst of fulfilling it. By fulfilling, I mean getting it ready to send out, just so there's no confusion. But we do have other titles that we do. We have a medieval fantasy title that we did called Tales from Nocturnia. That is actually a spinoff from Heirs. So if you are a fan of Heirs, you would probably be a fan of Tales from Nocturnia. We also have an all ages title that we do with Scout Comics called Misfits Clubhouse that we will talk a little bit more about tonight as well. But mainly we're the steampunk people. We dress in steampunk at shows, and it's gradually gotten crazier and more outlandish but we twin. Always, as you see there on the screen, twinning is winning. We try to match as often as possible, as Matt likes to tell everybody every time. It's so you can't tell us apart. It's a dad joke because it's pretty much the joke that he tells at every show.
Matt?
So I literally haven't even spoken a word on the broadcast chat, and I'm already getting busted on.
There
I
you
love
go.
it. So yeah, my name is Matt Knowles. I'm the other half of Insymmetry Creations. Like Steph said, we're with Heirs of Isildur. It's where steampunk comics and metal collide. We dress in steampunk. We have the steampunk aesthetic. We have the steampunk comic. And we also produce and write metal music that goes along with it. So we are all over the board when it comes to the things that we do. And looking forward to be able to talk to everybody about stuff tonight and get deeper into the steampunk lore with you.
All right. Well, I'm going to read this definition here, just in case you're watching, you're not familiar with steampunk, and we kind of talk about it if it really is all-encompassing. It says steampunk, a genre of science fiction that has a historical setting and typically features steam-powered machinery rather than advanced technology. Not every one of them have a historical setting. Do you think, Matt? Do they all have to have a historical setting? Or
I don't think they do at all. I think one of the neat things about steampunk is you've got a certain group, and I would say, I don't want to say gatekeeper, because gatekeeper is always a negative word, but a lot of people in steampunk will say it has to take place 1875 to 1893, and it has to be set in one of two places. It's either going to be in the Wild West or it's going to be in Victorian England. The thing to me about steampunk is that, yes, you're going to have the aesthetic, and you're going to have the look, and you're going to have gears and things like that. But it's always going to be about making something that is old, repurposing it, and making it something new. I always try to explain steampunk like this. If you look back at science fiction from the 50s, and you look at what the science fiction in the 50s was, it was flying Etzels in traffic lanes above like New York City. And that was what they thought the future was going to be. To me, I say take that back another 60 to 70 years into the 1880s, 1890s, and say if those people were going to create the future as we know it today, what would the future look like if you were using technology that was only available in the 1880s, 1890s?
Right, okay. What about you, Steph? You think, can you add to that? Because that was a lot to add.
Yeah, well, we get this, and the reason why is because we get this question a lot. There are those people when we go to a regular Comic-Con that will come up to us and say, well, what is steampunk exactly? Because I always hear about it, but I don't know exactly what it is. So we're well versed in having to answer some of the questions that we get sometimes. But yeah, like Matt said, we try to say that it is time agnostic is kind of the easiest way to say it. And that's kind of the beauty of steampunk is that there are definite rules, but don't let that make you think that it needs to be in a nice, neat little box. There's a lot of, just like if you look at movies, Wild Wild West is very different from what we're doing, but there's also some kind of, you have the same feel when you're watching it. But yeah, time, there are those that will say, oh, it has to take place between this year and this year. And we don't feel like it needs to be that strict because as far as our world, and it's funny because Matt and I were just talking about this today, as far as the village of the steampunk enclave that we have in our stories called Shadow's Haven. And they're a very different type of people. And time isn't necessarily the same there as it is as we would think it is.
Right. All right. Brian, anything you'd like to add to that? I know delved into some of the steampunk writing and everything.
Yeah, a little bit. I fell in love long ago with the aesthetic of it.
Yeah.
I love the leather and the more natural ingredients as opposed to everything being some sort of petroleum variant. And so, well, I've not written anything that's strictly steampunk as the gatekeepers might have it. When I wrote this book, hashtag always promote, available on Amazon. My villain is wearing basically Iron Man armor, but it's steam powered.
Yeah.
And then you start to think about, well, if he's getting up and about in a suit that's basically a closed system with steam pushing all the gears and everything, making it go, what else would he use steam for? And I wanted, that's where you get to thinking about the whole practical aspect of this kind of science. For instance, I was having the villain use it as a torture device. You slowly turn the steam up on somebody, you close them in a room, and until they crack. So yeah, I also like the idea that was said earlier about the idea that it doesn't have to be a specific time period. Because I'm listening to Steph and thinking, well, gee, what if we had a story where all of a sudden, like right now, we've got a problem with petroleum. That's hitting the headlines. What if somebody came out tomorrow and said, screw your Tesla, I've got something that runs on tap water. All you have to do is heat it up. There's your story. Free of charge, America. Yeah.
One of the interesting
trademark
things,
that. That's Brian's. No one steal that idea.
One of the interesting things in your opening, there was a lot of video clips from the band Abney Park.
Yep.
And Robert Brown, the vocalist of Abney Park, is actually a friend of Steph and mine. We met him about 4 years ago at a steampunk festival. Hit it off really well. Great guy. We've talked with him quite a bit since then. And at that show, he actually did a seminar on what is steampunk, and he took it into a really interesting angle. He said, "How steampunk is it?" And he's like, there are certain things that may just be a little bit steampunk. There are certain things like Brian just said. What Brian just said is very steampunk, where he's getting into the science of it and really making sure that the steam in steampunk is there. There are things like what Steph and I do, which are a little more, if you were on the scale of how steampunk is it may be a little bit less because it's more in the aesthetic. There's the look, there's the gears, there's things like that. But we do a lot more sci-fi where there's some time travel and some portals and people being brought in from other time periods.
Right.
So other forms of dress, other technologies, other forms of dialect are going to be in there as well, which really helped to free us up. We didn't have to worry about, are people going to believe that this is steampunk? Because we're like, well, if we wanted to put something in there, somebody just came through a portal with that device or that technology or that thought process, and we could go from there.
Yeah, because it's interesting. Because even the Abney Park story, that if I remember correctly, it's been years since I've heard it. But even they're not really fixed to a certain time. Something happened in their storyline too. That is it's more aesthetic than it is a time frame for them. And they used to kind of be more of a techno band, and then they ended up whatever the story. Because I know he's got a whole bunch of like comics and books out there about it. I haven't read, but I know a little bit about Abney Park. So
yeah, I know they do. When we go to shows, it is unbelievable how much people are completely into Abney Park. If we go to a steampunk show, which we go to a few every year, if you don't hear at least 3 or 4 or 5 Abney Park songs being played 3 or 4 times over the course of the weekend, then you're not really at a steampunk show, because there is probably no band that people will put at the top of that pedestal than Abney Park when it comes to that steampunk aesthetic and the sound that kind of has that, like, sometimes it's like a rockabilly or 1920s sound in the music. And there's people that they just really put them at that top of the pedestal.
Right. Well, and that's the thing about steampunk is it's a genre that kind of spans over a whole bunch of different mediums. It doesn't have to be, it's not just books. It's not just comics. It's not just music. It's a real culture and a lifestyle. So what prompted that? What was the? Because I know it started with K.W. Jeter saying kind of making a play on cyberpunk, calling it steampunk. But really, we're talking about since the 80s. In the past 10 years, the genre has really exploded. What caused that explosion? Was it just a gradual movement, or are people just fed up with this day and age and they kind of wanted to see something old and new?
I think it's kind of hard to say where it started, like what really kind of blew it up. But I think part of it is, I know from like my personal standpoint, and I think there's a lot of other people out there that kind of felt the same way. For me, I came from the metal music world. That's how we have metal in what we do. Yeah. But I did the whole, the whole goth thing, the whole everything black, everything looking, really evil and all that. And I wanted to do something that was still creative and still had a lot of, intensity to it, but there's more whimsy and more fun. It's like you can't go to a steampunk show and not have a little crack of smile, because people are doing stuff that's just silly. They're taken very seriously, but there's a little more personality to it. And I think there's a lot of people out there, especially people that were into goth and alternative, that wanted to do something that wasn't just always going to be black. Like you said, the whole thing about when goths found brown.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that there's a lot to it. People like the aesthetic of stuff like Mad Max. And I'm not going to put words into Steph's mouth, but I know that when we first talked about the fact that steampunk was involved in this, she comes from more of a Wild West and more survivalist and her motif. And she's like, well, I really want to try to get some of that into what we're doing. And so part of our evolution and how we dress at shows kind of comes along with that. And Steph, I'm not trying to, like I said, put words in your mouth.
No, it's totally true. Yeah, I mean, Yeah, absolutely.
So what was it for you, Steph? I know Brian said it was the aesthetic that kind of attracted him. What was it that really attracted you to the steampunk culture?
I kind of love telling this story because I was familiar with steampunk, and exactly like Matt said, I love more of the Outlander, the Wastelander, the Wild West look to it. I played Fallout. Yeah. So to me, I'm like that, but that's not necessarily, that could be its own thing. It doesn't even have to be steampunk at all, but you do see those elements in steampunk, but they may not be the first things that you see in steampunk. A lot of times you see more of the Victorian, which I appreciate. Yeah. I think the costume is gorgeous. But it's not like my top favorite with steampunk. Doesn't mean I don't like it, but I was familiar with steampunk, and didn't know a lot about it until I met Matt. Matt created Heirs of Isildur. He was working on the first story arc, Crossroads Conundrum, when I came into the picture, and I saw how he was combining time travel, which of course is a big factor in steampunk, but not always. So he was combining time travel and metal music, and I had never seen anything like that in comics. I mean, there might be a movie or two out there that is similar, but in comic form, I had never seen it before. And so I was attracted to the story and the aesthetic of Heirs. And now that I'm on board as editor and co-writer and consultant, I see it in a whole different light. And that's kind of what really drew it to me. But the steampunk shows that we go to, the people are amazing. They're just warm, nice, fun, amazing people that don't care. They really don't care if they're going to go out, they'll walk down the street in, full Victorian garb on their unicycle. They don't care. They're just having fun. And I admire that. I respect that, because who can make fun of somebody if they're not hurting anybody? They're just having a good time. And in this day and age, we all need that. So that's what really draws me to steampunk.
And Matt, you said you were a metal guitarist. You're in the metal. So how did you find steampunk, or were you just kind of it was always there?
So steampunk was definitely not always there. So it's a good question there. So I was in a metal band for most of my life, toiled in the underground, did like 5 or 6 CDs, did one tour in Europe. But was always just right there on the cusp of doing something. And right when we were about to actually have a chance to do something, like we actually had labels from Germany and whatnot. We were already signed to the label in Holland, but we had some big labels in Germany and whatnot that wanted to sign us. And it was right when the the digital market, MP3s was just really making themselves known. And this is like 2008, 2009 in that era. And record labels did not know how to convert over to monetizing the MP3 market. They were all about physical media, got to sell records, got to sell CDs, got to sell cassettes still at that time. And we just could not get over that hump. All the labels that wanted to work with us, we talked with them, and then a month later we didn't hear from them, and they were bought out by some other company. And it just was this just never-ending cycle of disappointment, whether it be from people outside or stuff that was happening inside. And one of the guys in the band had a chance to get back to a band that he was already involved in called Camelot, which is one of the biggest power metal bands in the world. He is still in that band to this day. Just actually talked to him a couple of days ago, Sean Tibbetts. And so at that time, I was like, you know what, screw it. Sean's going to do his thing. And I just needed to take a break. I needed to get away from it. I was tired of dealing with this toil of spending so much time working for this craft that I wasn't able to get anything back out of. You can only dump time and money into a toilet for so long,
right,
before you just have to stop going into that bathroom in a sense. And that's a weird analogy. I just made it up, but I think it's kind of cool. But so fast forward about 8 years, and I wanted to get back in. I always had the creative bug, and I wanted to get back into writing, but I wanted to do a little more than just metal music. And I started going back to some of the old material my old band had, or stuff that I had written at that time that just never did anything. And I found myself repurposing these old lyrics or these old things and turning them into something new.
Wow, that's very steampunk.
And I was like, wow, my life feels like a steampunk allegory right now that's literally playing out. So I'm like, if my life is literally playing out this way, let's bring in the steampunk aesthetic. And I ended up having a little short story that I wrote that was going to build alongside the music, that then turned into a ebook, that then I was like, we're going to have this whole thing. And I started converting it into what I thought was a comic, but it was more like an illustrated novel. And I will say, being completely honest, it was not really done well. I would say, hey, I'm writing a comic. I'm doing a comic. And we all know the first time you do a comic and you don't really know it, you don't do a very good job at it. It was completely an illustrated novel. When Steph came in, I had already released issue 2 of the 11 arc series. And why was it 11 arcs? Is because it tied back into every single song on the album. Like there are some songs that are backstories for characters. Hey, you want to know the backstory of this character? Go look at the lyrics and listen to this song. You can get the backstory. And Steph and I met when I had just released issue 2 and just put out the first metal album. And like she had said, hey, she thought that the way that I was trying to construct things was cool. But to be honest, I had no idea what I was doing and trying to put a comic out. And she was like, if you want to do a comic, and she said it very nicely. It was not, this is my paraphrase after the fact, looking back in 2020 vision. She was saying the whole time, if you want to do a comic, you need to learn how to do a freaking comic. Her background was comics. Her background was doing shorter stories and knowing how to concisely portray something in a comic world. And her knowledge of that and my desire to do something like that was a really perfect yin and yang. And we knew right then that we needed to start working together. And if you look at what we're doing with the Perilous Prospects now, which is the second arc for Heirs of Isildur, we're both completely happy with the format of it, the art, the lettering, the style of it is now, in our minds, the best thing that we've done from a full package perspective. The art, the way that it's written, the way that it's designed, we feel like we can put it out there and have it hang with any comic that's out there. Not saying it's better than or worse than, just saying if you put it on a shelf next to any comic, it's actually going to be able to stand beside it without going, yeah, well, it's kind of a comic, but not really. And this, nope, absolutely is. And we're super stoked to be able to get this thing out there.
David, you also put in the notes. I noticed you also put in the notes where to find the song lyrics and everything for your characters. So that's
absolutely
really cool. So Brian, now, not to say age or anything, but The steampunk, the term steampunk. I was coming to you next, Randy. The steampunk,
Brace yourself.
the steampunk term has been around, but wouldn't you say there's been stuff that's kind of steampunkish, like Steph mentioned? I think she said Wild Wild West, but
Yeah.
you look at the old Wild Wild West show and Artemis Gordon and all that. So you've seen that kind of thing. Did that stand out as something that's going to be that could be a genre in itself, or?
I had vaguely heard of steampunk as a writing genre, but what really drove it home for me, and this was my first immersive exposure to the steampunk motif, was a role-playing game that came out back in the 90s called Space 1899. And it was basically about moon flights, and all of this was, steam powered. And that's where I really got into the alternate history aspect of it. I've always, I shouldn't say always, but since I was about 10 years old, I've been a fan of time travel stories.
Oh, yeah.
And, alternate histories, things like that, and the what if sort of scenarios. And I just love the idea that, all of a sudden everything's run on steam, again, like I was saying, you just start thinking about, well, what would this lead to? Like clean energy. And I love the idea of the Zeppelins flying around. I've always thought those were, incredible. And, just the sheer grace of seeing them, go across the sky and everything. That was really my first real exposure to it, or at least it's something that captured my eye, because I was really heavily into tabletop gaming at the time, like Dungeons and Dragons and Champions and things like that. And so, I just saw this as something you could, not only you could make superheroes out of it, you could make science fiction, you could make romance, you could, the genre blending using the steampunk motif was, virtually, without limit. So that's what appealed. One of the things that appealed to me. And I, sometimes I wish I could introduce more of it into my own work, but you never know what I may slide in there. So
Right. And Randy, this kind of thing has been around in comics for years, huh?
Oh, it's been around in comics. It's been around in novels. It's been around in movies. If you sit and really think about it, all of those great old turn of the century movies that we saw, even the Hammer films and the look at the George Pal's Time Machine as a grand example of that. You can't help but see steampunk in that time machine.
Oh yeah.
And it's a natural outcropping really from the days of the 1900s and you showed it in your opening with 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Hey, Sarah.
And Jules Verne and H.G. Wells coming through and bending science from a 1900s perspective and seeing what the future is from that point. And like what Brian was saying, any time now in comics, in movies, that you see a Zeppelin flying through the air, it's either one of two things. It's either a World War II era film or bit of entertainment, or it's an alternate reality.
Yeah.
Right.
You go and you look at Watchmen, and that's one of the first things that you see in the night sky is a Zeppelin or a dirigible. And you go, oh, well, we're not really on our Earth, are we? Because those things aren't around that much. It's an automatic device. And it's steampunk, it's been around literally since the 1900s.
Yeah.
in one form or another.
True. Yeah.
And it's just these great visualists have brought it up and it's become a side genre of entertainment. From the Wells books, from the Verne books, and all that, taking that science and pushing it forward. And that's where all of the great advancements have come from. We still haven't solved time travel, obviously, but or as far as we know,
we haven't. What?
As far as we know,
See it?
Area 51. Anyway,
I think I've been working on it. I think there's a space relativity problem with that. It has to do with the Earth's rotation and the movement of the sun. But that's a whole nother matter.
that's next week.
That's next week.
We do time travel next week.
But you go through like in War of the Worlds, they're introducing biochemical warfare, laser weaponry, gigantic machines on tripods that are moving.
Yeah.
How were they moving back then? Well, in Wells's mind, it was probably moving by steam.
Yeah.
You know, the again, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, anything that Verne wrote, especially First Men in the Moon, just screams of this genre. And that's really, I think, where you see the origin of this. And it's taken other imaginative people looking for great entertainment, looking for escapism, to take it and put it up and play with it however they see fit. It's a great playground to play in, alternate realities, alternate histories, that kind of thing. That's always really fascinated me. And, you know, they've been so, media in general have been so afraid to try to do this for so long. It's really bold to see like Man in the High Castle come out. That's a really an interesting bent on an alternate reality. But nobody, as far as I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, has really done a great steampunk movie.
No, outside of Wild Wild West, which a lot of people want to crap on, I think that is a great steampunk movie. But you're right. It seems like whenever a steampunk movie looks like it's going to come out, and this is going to be great. Like, what was the one that just came out that was a big, huge blockbuster movie? And
what is it? Mortal? What?
Mortal? Yes.
Yeah.
Mortal
Is
Instruments.
Is it Mortal Instruments? I couldn't remember.
Mortal Instruments.
Is
that the one that
like
Del Toro was involved with, where cities are moving?
Yeah, that one looked like it was going to be a great movie, and everybody's like, "Oh, this is finally going to be the great steampunk movie." And then you watched it, and you're like, "This is all visual and no substance." Like they tried to put so much into that movie that it just became a mockery of itself. As cool as it looked, you're like, "The story is silly." And I think that's where the problem has been, is that outside of Wild Wild West, which for whatever reason, people want to say that's not a steampunk movie, which to me is ridiculous, because you look at the contraptions, you look at the whimsy, you look at the creativity, all those things are there in the Wild Wild West. So why does that movie not get put to the top of the list? I don't understand.
You're talking the movie, though.
I'm talking the movie.
The movie.
Not the TV series.
Right, the movie with He Who Shall Not Be Named was actually one of my. It's actually my favorite steampunk movie that's out there, because the stuff they did with the train, the kind of contraptions, everything has that Rube Goldberg kind of feel to it. Like, we're going to do all these ridiculous things. I mean, you even look at Back to the Future. Back to the Future is not a steampunk movie, but Doc Brown does some stuff in there that if you took it out of a 1980s setting and you put it anywhere else, would be completely steampunk.
Well, again, you see a lot of those elements all over the place. 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Like I said, with Time Machine, that Time Machine is steampunk.
Oh, yeah.
It's got that whole aesthetic, the whole just barely pre-Art Deco movement. Art style is just, or Victorian, I guess and that covers too broad of an area to really, label it correctly. But that whole era has got a charm to it that it's very rare for folks to catch. When you talk about the Wild West movie, the only thing I really remember from that is the mechanical spider.
Well, you had the mechanical spider.
The main reason I remember that is because I watched the Superman documentary.
Right.
That had what's his face, the producer in it, talking
John
about
Peters,
was it? No, it wasn't.
No,
Gruber.
No, you're right. You're right.
Gruber,
that's right.
Gruber that kept talking about how Superman had to fight a giant spider because giant spiders would be cool, and then all of a sudden there's a giant mechanical spider that shows up in Wild Wild West.
I mean, you had a whole bunch of stuff, because with just Artemis alone, with the head of the, I can't remember, was it the colonel? It was the head of somebody that they used the machine to kind of see through the eyes, see the last thing that they saw.
Yeah.
It was all over the the movie, honestly. The whole thing.
As a kid, I loved the TV show.
Oh yeah.
Robert Conrad, and there was all sorts of mechanical gimmickry going on there that you knew in the back of your head that wasn't around during the Wild West days, but it sure was cool to see.
Well, they like to consider that Weird West. It's a genre of steampunk, but they like to consider it the Weird West for some odd reason. But I mean, it's still steampunk.
It sounds to me like people just want to pigeonhole entertainment, and they shouldn't. They should just sit back and enjoy it.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Well, and now we're talking about the steam element, and we're talking about the but there's also a fantasy element to steampunk.
Oh
there's
sure.
Every time you involve an alternate universe, you're talking fantasy anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So does that appeal to you, Steph? The fantasy element?
Oh yeah,
or is it just?
Yeah, that's probably one of the bigger ones because like Brian mentioned, playing D&D. I've been a D&D player for more than half my life at this point, so I'm all for any of the fantasy elements. That's why it was exciting to do our spinoff and do Tales from Nocturnia. It was more of a medieval setting, but I got to kind of get my little fantasy fix in there. But yeah, it's absolutely a part of steampunk, and you will find some steampunk stories where it's a major part. You're going to see, creatures that are absolutely fantasy creatures that you would see in a tabletop game or role-playing game like D&D. And that's not to mention all the other variations of punk. It's funny because Matt and I were on a panel, it was a steampunk literature panel, and we were the only comic writers. We were there with other prose authors who were steampunk authors, but we got on the subject of different types of punk because there's cyberpunk, and we learned about, so there's solar punk. I think at one point, not even joking, they even said garbage punk, which I have no idea.
I actually have a list of genres to talk about later, but yeah.
Garbage punk, steam funk, which is like in black culture, steam funk, and we're like, that's actually kind of cool.
It was really interesting.
I could see cool. that.
And I have a friend who wrote a book on circus punk.
Yeah, see, and that sounds that I would all be for that. That sounds amazing. There were so many of them that sounds really cool. Okay, and that sounds really cool. Yeah, might not be something that we're gonna write, but we're gonna appreciate it nonetheless. But yeah, fantasy I'm a huge fantasy fan, D&D player for a long time. So I love to see that in steampunk or anything really.
Circus punk would be interesting because circuses to me are almost like stuck in time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you go to see it, especially a great old style circus, that's what you're watching is something that could have happened in the 1900s or back during those Victorian days when they were trying to entertain people and can only do it inside of tents.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Nightmare Alley had a little bit of that aesthetic to it. Yeah. The circuit, if I was to give it, I could see it fit under circus punk for sure.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things I always try to say is, I look at the quote unquote steampunk world very similarly to the metal world, where there are tons of different subgenres of metal, but at the end they're all metal music. Mm-hmm. So death metal is not, hair metal is not this, is not that, but is it all metal? Yes, it's metal. Mm-hmm. And I look at steampunk very similar, where there is steampunk to me is like the big umbrella term, even though there's also very traditional steampunk. You've got atom punk and cyberpunk and all that. There's still forms of steampunk. There's still something in there that's all going to look the same. You look at atom punk is the like World War II era nuclear Cold War kind of times, and it's still got steampunk. I mean, if you got gears and if you've got gears and goggles. And you've got brown in there somewhere. Yeah. It's probably going to be something you could say is steampunk. And to me, it's like Randy said, why try and pigeonhole it? I've never been somebody that wants to be pigeonholed. When with our phrase being where steampunk comics and metal collide, those three things right there should not go together no matter what. And we have fun making them work. We have fun going to steampunk shows, and I'll never forget. And we had this happen twice, where a senior citizen in a lark rolled up to our table, and we talked with them. They liked everything, and they're like, you know what? I want one of everything. And we're like, you do know that's a extreme metal album over there, right? They're like, I don't care. You guys are cool. I want the CD anyways. I said I want one of everything. Give me one of everything. And we're like, okay, that's probably the first time that we've sold this metal CD to someone that's going to go back to their retirement community or their retirement home with this metal CD. But it was great. At one point, we actually had sold more CDs to senior citizens than to your typical demographic of metal fan. And that was why, because they just liked the whole overall concept.
Oh, cool.
Well, you got to figure that the people who got in on the ground floor with metal are now reaching retirement age.
It's true. Oh yeah,
So-
absolutely.
Very true.
Yeah.
Or I have passed it. So yeah.
Yeah.
So one word that we keep throwing around there is that we of course we have Steam, but punk. So what is punk, Matt? What classifies as punk? And not the. Well, what kind of punk do you need to have in steampunk for it to be steampunk?
So I think that, that's actually where I don't think somebody's ever really asked that simple question right there. I think that it comes into where you look at the creativity, the nonconformity.
Yeah.
I mean, punk in the 70s is all nonconformist.
Yeah.
And you look at steampunk, and it's if you look at a Wild West movie or a Victorian movie, there's a certain set of rules that it's going to follow to actually be a time-specific period. When you put steampunk in there, that's when it becomes nonconformist. You start seeing things that you shouldn't see in those times. The big creative things that shouldn't be there, like even Randy said about, the big, mechanical spider. Those things never existed. And I think that that's where the punk element comes in, is when you start having these nonconformist, big, wild, creative things that you have to open up your mind and open up your imagination to actually believe could exist. To me, that's the punk aspect of all of it.
Think of the character TikTok from the Oz books.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Solid steampunk right there.
Sure. No, that's clock punk.
Oh, funny.
I hate these gatekeepers.
Clock punk. I don't remember him being associated with a clock, but that's all right.
Well,
But if you haven't seen Return to Oz, that's TikTok's running all through that. That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
That's true.
That's
true.
But like you said before, little elements here and there, but nothing has really been able to be labeled as a steampunk movie.
Right. So what would what would you say? This, of course, this is open to anybody. What would you want to point to and say that's steampunk? It could be a book, comic book, TV show, movie, whatever you want. What if somebody came up and asked you to point to an example of steampunk other than yourself? What would you point to?
I think Sarah hit it in the chat a while back. She said Lady Mechanica.
Yeah.
That was the first. Yeah. That was the first comic book that I saw that really got my wheels turning about that's a really cool aesthetic in comics. Another one that's near and dear to our hearts as far as our creative circle is Boston Metaphysical Society.
Uh-huh.
That one doesn't have the aesthetic as much as Lady Mechanica does. Boston Metaphysical is a lot more traditional in its look, but it definitely has the metaphysical side of it. But I would definitely point, if somebody wanted the look, absolutely would go to Lady Mechanica. That one by far and away is to me, I think it has that look.
Is Lady Mechanica the Phil Foglio property?
No, that's Lady or Girl Genius.
Girl Genius.
This is guy I can't remember. Used to come out from Marvel.
It come out from Marvel?
Or it didn't come out from Marvel, but I think the guy used to work for Marvel.
Oh,
and
Joe Benitez.
Yes, wow. Thank you. I would also say the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
That's definitely
that too, very much so. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was trying to find out who did Lady Mechanica, but it's a. Who is it?
I think if I was going to point to something steampunk, there's a comic series out called Heirs of Isildur that pretty much. No. One of the things that I really like about steampunk that I see more and more often when we do the steampunk shows is the Jules Verne type of steampunk, where it's like all squids and submarines and I don't know. I just love that. I think it's really cool, and that's not something that you would typically think of right away. But I think Brian mentioned it earlier. Jules Verne is definitely got some steampunk elements, so that's something else that comes.
Well, he was writing during that era.
Yeah, and that's why he wasn't even trying to do it. Yeah. It was just what was happening at the time.
In all honesty, I think he created a lot of it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, it was speculative fiction.
Yeah.
What, so. And
right.
You speculate on what you have available to speculate on.
That was the seed. The seed he planted in the ground that grew
Right.
into this
Absolutely.
genre. Yeah.
He's more of a hard science fiction as opposed to H.G. Wells. It's more of a maybe science fantasy.
Well,
if you read
I think you might have that mixed,
No, I don't
honestly,
think so.
because Wells was dealing with genetics. He was dealing with GMO foods, with Food of the Gods. He was dealing with laser technology with the Martians, biochemical warfare with the Martians, where Verne was talking about going to the moon, which was a crazy idea at the time.
But he was very technical about it.
Oh yeah, well of course, but isn't that steampunk though?
Well, that's my point.
To an extent,
that's what I'm saying.
You have to have that machinery in order to go. And how does that machinery get powered? Right. It's powered by what they know, or Verne knew at the time, which was steam.
Right, absolutely.
You know?
But when you read 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, he describes the Nautilus.
Sure.
When you read H.G. Wells' Time Machine, it's not as articulate as
No, but if you read War of the Worlds, he describes the Martian machines, the cylinders, the stuff inside the cylinders. At the time, you have to remember when these books were written, when these pulp novels were written, these guys were paid by the word. So if Verne needed a little extra money that month, everything got described. Same thing with Wells. If you read the front part of War of the Worlds compared to the back part, once the Martians have conquered and the main character is destitute and wandering towards London, that gets really descriptive. He goes through and redescribes the Martians again, describes the cylinder, describes the machines, and gets into really hard detail. But it really all depends on where the writer is at the time and kind of how much money he needs. Because if you read Journey of the Center of the Earth is another great example of a very disjointed book that's got a great idea. It's a lot of great ideas all kind of strung together into kind of a story that's got that's got an ending to it. I mean, if War of the Worlds is the same thing. The narrator's never named. He's always aloof. He's the desperation, the feeling of desperation just eats through from the second half of the book all the way to the end. The guy is ready to give up. He's running into people that are gone insane and crazy and want to give up or of trying to dig underground or find a way around living with this invasion instead of trying to combat it. You know, honestly, I haven't read all of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, but I imagine it's kind of the same way.
It's very dense.
You know, look at Master of the World. That's another
very full.
That's another great book of his, Master of the World, that carries on Nemo, right?
Oh, I'm not familiar with it.
It's just as long as I've read. I think it does. Yeah.
Yeah. That he ends up running in a very large airship, a dirigible. That's like this big, massive, almost like the Shield helicarrier that they run across. Just it's almost the opposite of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Only it's flying through the air. Like
so
the
if you want
to
see a show that is in pop culture, and I don't want to say recent because it hasn't been on TV for about 5-10 years, that really did everything they could to bring as much steampunk style props into the real world, into today's world, is Warehouse 13. Warehouse 13. You can tell that they were like, we got to have everything. We're going on Amazon, and every possible steampunk item we can buy off of Amazon, we're putting on the set. We're going to have a steampunk flat panel computer. We're going to have a steampunk keyboard.
Yeah.
Stuff like everything was like silly steampunk. Like, who has a steampunk flat panel monitor?
And again, a lot of the items that they were chasing after were Victorian era items.
Yes.
That were created back during that period.
You know, there was H.G. Wells was on the show, but H.G. Wells was a female. There was all kinds of stuff where they really tried to be paranormal private investigators in today's day and age, looking back into all these different things. So I think Warehouse 13 is probably the most current piece of pop culture that actually got the steampunk aesthetic right.
Yeah. And I just remembered something while Matt was talking. It was very short-lived. I think it was on UPN, if anyone remembers that. It was called Legend. with Richard Dean Anderson and John Delancey.
Wow.
Basically about, Richard Dean Anderson was this adventurer and John Delancey was the dime novelist that followed him around and spiced up his adventures. But there was a real heavy steampunk element to that where Anderson was always inventing things like a car.
Yeah.
Back in, the Old West era. Hey,
Luke. How you doing, buddy?
How you doing, Luke? That it was very steampunk, but, it was on the fledgling network, and it didn't last very long, unfortunately.
Something that I got to watch while I was laying in bed was His Dark Materials on HBO Max. And there's one entire alternate world that's very mechanical, very steampunky.
Yeah, it's considered a steampunk trilogy.
Is it?
Yeah, His Dark Materials. There's actually a movie called The Golden Compass that was based on it. It didn't really take off though.
Yes.
Yeah.
Years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the Golden Compass is another one of those movies that is steeped in the steam.
Right. What was interesting is you're talking about TV shows.
Lore,
I know.
As far as
Well, like what Brian was saying when he said UPN, I thought we were going, there's a Jules Verne show,
right,
where he was kind of traveling around and doing that. And there's been like these dips into steampunk that just hasn't connected with the general audience. Of course, His Dark Materials has actually been on for 4 or 5 years now? 3, 4 years?
Third season, I think. They're doing a truncated end season to finish off the storyline. Apparently, I think it's 3. I think they're on their 3rd season now.
Okay, and that's one of the few ones that have actually continued on.
Oh yeah.
When I was younger, talking about the Weird West and everything like that was Briscoe County.
Yeah.
Briscoe County.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
That was a great show.
And that was one I honestly
Briscoe
think.
County.
Yeah, that one I think would have actually taken a lot better if they had better time frame for that. It was usually played like early in the afternoon on a Sunday, like 6 o'clock in the afternoon or whatever. And it's like, if you had given this thing a chance, it probably would have gone 2 or 3 more seasons.
Well, I was back when Fox was being incredibly fickle, and a lot of their shows weren't lasting more than 1 season at a time.
Yeah, look
especially
at Firefly.
their genre-based side. What?
Mm-hmm. Look at Firefly.
Fire.
How they
Well,
bollocks that up.
But that's another.
I think
one
they
too.
started rethinking things after Firefly, but there's been enough genre shows on Fox to fill an entire channel. I mean, you look at Space Above and Beyond that had infinite possibilities. Brimstone's another favorite of mine. If you've never seen that show, you can't find it anywhere because of the music rights are a problem. Mm-hmm. But the show, the writing, the acting on that show was impeccable. Just incredible stuff. Talk about a tormented soul, literally, on that show. But there,
Lori Petty.
You get little spots. That not everything is X-Files.
Right.
But
no.
There's Fox.
It's a trip that you guys bring up Briscoe County. Briscoe County because everybody's like, oh, Bruce Campbell, Evil Dead. I'm like, Briscoe County.
Same
Bruce
here.
Campbell, Briscoe
Same
County.
thing.
Yeah.
Same here.
But with Briscoe County, one of the interesting things about that show was they actually got dinged because for the first 2 seasons, they were all over the place, not really sure which direction they wanted to go. Mm-hmm. Was it going to be sci-fi or was it going to be the thing with the glowing orbs? Or was it going to be like Wild West fantasy? And they finally got everything together in season 3. And that, like Randy said, that's when Fox was like, no, we don't need a season 4.
Cut it. Yeah. And they cut it basically when everything was about to be revealed. Had your cliffhanger, and then you never came back.
I've got all of those on disc. I need to sit down and rewatch.
Oh yeah, they're fantastic. I love it. Has that story style to it, where chapter 1 this happens,
But in the age of streaming services, you could see Fox. Fox is connected with Hulu, but and FX. But you could see Fox doing a streaming service, just offering all of their old shows.
Oh
that they've shit canned over the years. Werewolf. We were talking about that a couple of episodes back. It was a great show.
Yeah,
but
there was some really good quality stuff out.
Yeah,
that didn't last very long because they were fickle.
Yeah. And
Sarah asked, "Are there more sci-fi and fantasy genres than horror, like sort of steampunk based?" And when we were talking earlier, there's romance. Mm-hmm. There's oh golly. I mean, steampunk is basically just a setting or an aesthetic to over any story.
It's really an umbrella label.
Yeah.
To
Kind
cover
of
a
like
lot of
romance
different
is, but
properties.
it encompasses all kinds of different subgenres. Same with science fiction, same with horror,
Well, yeah, and to answer her question, she's asking, is there any horror? And there's not very much horror steampunk, and I think the main reason why is because it's difficult to do. As Matt mentioned earlier, there's a lot of steampunk that's kind of silly, and so it just would seem. I mean, I think you could do horror comedy with steampunk, but I can't envision a slasher where he's got this contraption with gears on it that comes out of like a cane or something and stabs somebody. I just think that it takes away the scary, the actual horror part of it. Like
Brian said, he's getting all sorts
right.
Hold my beer.
So picture like the Penguin from Batman, right? Like we're talking about like Danny DeVito, okay, with a little bit. But it doesn't mean it can't be done. I would love to see it. I think that it would be great. But I think steampunk is so whimsical and silly that it would be hard to do.
Well, there is a series. It's called the
I think the closest thing series. Probably.
Go ahead, Matt. Go ahead.
I think the closest thing in movies is Pride, Prejudice, and Zombies, where Pride, Prejudice, and Zombies, that actually has got a little bit more of that steampunk flair, but like in the Victorian setting, I think that's probably the closest thing from a movie setting that has got the horror bent to it that I know of.
Not Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter?
Yeah.
Well, okay.
There's a lot of that in Hansel and Gretel too, if I remember.
And Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. See, I was testing Randy.
Yeah. But as far as steampunk, as far as books, you have the Clockwork Century books by Sherry Priest, where there was kind of a gas release, and you had your zombies. Same thing for George Mann's Immortal Engine, his Newberry and Hobbs series. They also have. It's almost like you could have that horror element, but it's got to be mixed with something else. Like the Newberry and Hobbs series is kind of like a Holmes and Watson detective steampunk, but it has those elements in it. I remember reading a how to write steampunk book where it basically said you almost always have to have a monster. And I think what the idea behind that was like maybe Frankenstein. I think that's why they thought that. And I don't really necessarily agree with that.
There's more electricity than steam. Yeah. Yep. Go ahead. Yeah. Sorry, Steph.
No, it's okay. Like just Victorian, if you take away the contraptions and the zeppelins and the gears and the steam part, you go straight Victorian. There's tons of horror. I mean, that's where horror originated pretty much. I mean, you've got Sleepy Hollow, everything from Sleepy Hollow, and like you said, Frankenstein. So if you strip away a lot of the other fun aspects of steampunk, then it's absolutely there. Victorian horror is huge.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But I'll tell you what, while we're going to wait for Matt to reboot, we'll go ahead and take our break now. And let's see, we'll run some bumps. We'll be right back.
We're bumping, people. Bump. Now on Sunday mornings, longtime independent comics creator Randy Zimmerman brings to you a podcast that talks about the lighter and more whimsical side of comics, the fun side of comics. That's right. Sunday Funnies is back Sunday morning, 9 a.m. on the Raging 2 YouTube channel and on certain Facebook pages. Check it out, won't you? Special guests, great talk, and a lot of fun as we work to put the fun back in funny books. See you there. Hello, comic book readers and collectors. My name is Randy Zimmerman, and I'm here to introduce you to the Fellowship of the Indies. The Fellowship is a group of creators that came together for a promising business deal that fell through. But don't worry, because what came from the deal were 9 spectacular comics from diverse genres and creators. All 9 books are printed and ready to go, along with metal bookmarks, retailer levels, and even month 2 books, which are being specially made for a short period. Just know that by pledging, you'll be getting 9 great comics, 32 pages of book, for the awesome price of $25 plus shipping. That's over 250 pages of incredible indie comics. So secure your copies today.
All right. And I also want to remind you, for everyone out there that is shipping out comics, you can save 5% on your next Gemini mail order. All you have to do is go over to Gemini Comic Supply and type in that coupon code RAGIN2 to get yourself 5% off. So that's a real good deal. Don't forget to do that. Also, follow us on Facebook, Dispatches from Outside the Box. If you have any questions about tonight's episode or any future episodes, send your questions to, all right, and we'll take a long breath for this one, Dispatches from Outside the Box at gmail.com. Any questions you have, go ahead and send them over there, and we'll look at them on the show. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube, the Raging 2 Broadcast Network. Not only do you like and subscribe, hit the bell icon, share it, tell your friends, tell your loved ones, tell your enemies. It doesn't matter. Just go and do it. And so don't forget to do that. We love people over here. Please subscribe. Anyway, so we were talking. Now, I wanted to show this. Now, Sarah made a comment earlier. Let me see if I can find it. She says, for me, I'm not pigeonholing. I'm giving a label to help someone understand what I'm talking about. Yeah. And I think that's what kind of happens with this. Like when you say steampunk, because steampunk does cover so much stuff, there are certain genres or certain labels that are given to certain things to kind of help people really focus on what they want to see in steampunk, what they can relate to. And here's some of the genres. I'm going to kind of go over it, and maybe we could come up with... There's one genre called... It's steampunk, but it's called boilerpunk. And what this is the blue-collar answer to aristocratic steampunk, incorporating the experiences and the hardships of actually shoveling coal to bring steam to upper classes. So I cannot name... I was thinking of an example of that, but I cannot think of anything that might have that. Maybe the... I'm not too familiar. Maybe Steam Boy was a...
what about Immortal Engines?
Immortal Engines. That's the name of that one. Mm-hmm. Could be. Yeah, maybe. I tried watching that one. I didn't get through it. I'm pretty honest with you. But that's a good one, I guess. Immortal Engines. And this is... Go ahead.
I was going to say, I see you had a clip from Howl's Moving Castle.
Mm-hmm.
On there. I actually got to see that at the theater. That was pretty impressive.
Yeah, see, if you read the book is not steampunk.
Yeah.
The book is very
well. That
very
Miyazaki and Ghibli Studios obviously saw it as that, because it's very, the castle itself is very steampunk-ish. A lot of steam
absolutely.
Coming out, and yeah. Even the way it moves is so computer. It was all computer animated. The castle was, so it's very, very technical, very jagged, mitered movements. So it's, yeah, like I said, it's pretty impressive.
Well, then that brings me. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say there's a couple of movies that I was in my reading phase there for a minute that we didn't mention. Am I still?
Yeah, you're coming through a little bit.
Yeah, you're still breaking up.
Let me see here. So am I still freezing up?
You're fine at the moment.
You're a little better now.
Yep. Okay. Cleared up there for...
So A House with a Clock in the Walls.
Okay.
Yes. Yep.
A House with a Clock in the Walls. Those are a couple of ones that have come out recently that are definitely really solid steampunk movies.
Which that actually brings me to the next genre on the list, which is clockpunk. And Hugo was one of those I was going to use. And this is what I was talking about TikTok earlier. TikTok was he steam or was he clockwork?
He was wound.
He was wound, right? So he was clockwork. And that's the idea, like say the house with the clocks in the walls. It's steampunk, but it's like a subgenre of steampunk that uses clock as instead of steam. But which I kind of asked the question. So has there been stuff that people will say is steampunk, and you're like, no, that's not steampunk? I mean,
I try not to categorize it that way. I think it would have to be pretty much a stretch. There's a few things that I'm like, okay, just because the character wore goggles in one scene doesn't make it steampunk, you know? So I think that you probably definitely could. But as we talked about for the last hour, we've mentioned so many different titles of movies and TV shows and books and comics that all fit the steampunk aesthetic and are all completely different stories.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, someone might say that Batman: The Animated Adventures could be steam because, you know, it had dirigibles all flying all across Gotham City, even in the opening credits.
Yeah.
You know,
look at the.
I wouldn't call it steampunk by any stretch, to be honest.
Look at the great spaceships and ray guns and stuff from like Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon.
Oh, true.
You know, especially the early Buck Rogers stuff when they've with the jetpacks and the tubes and that just beautiful stuff. Real detailed mechanical work.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And that's actually a subgenre called, and yes, I'm going with, in case my producer's listening, yes, the subgenres, but it's actually it's considered ray gun gothic.
Yeah.
Right? Which is, though not strictly a subgenre, this type of retrofuturism based in part on Art Deco and streamlined modern styles has been used for a number of science fiction settings, usually in movies. So, and that made me think of one movie was Sky Captain in the World of Tomorrow.
Yes,
that's a great one.
Yes, one of my favorites.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. So would that be ray gun gothic or would that be diesel punk? Now diesel punk is usually they have this thing that for me diesel punk is kind of separate than steampunk.
I hate to disappoint your definitions, but I would rate that to be a pulp adventure more than anything.
Yeah,
pulp adventure,
like The Rocketeer.
Yeah.
Myself, I'd agree with that.
Just like Ray Gun Gothic, anything Ray Gun Gothic could probably be classified also as space opera.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
That's true. Yeah. Well, I mean, but what was I can't remember the name of the writer, but there was one where they basically have to use steam powered rockets to make it to the moon or make it to Mars or whatever the case is. So it's still incorporated in that steampunk, umbrella.
Well, are you thinking of was it George Milia's movie from the silent era?
No, well, there's that, but then
the one that shot the capsule to the moon like a gun and poked him in the eye.
Yeah, poked him in the eye. That's what I'm thinking of. Yeah.
Yeah, they touched on that one in Hugo, wasn't it? He was kind of a character in that. That was an alternate history there.
Right.
But this was a book I was thinking of. It was Mountains of the Moon. Not
enough alternate history movies out there, and lately with the PC market, there's going to be a lot fewer of them even being made. So shamefully.
Yep. Well, that's one thing. I noticed is, people talk about the time. You're talking about the 1800s, and people complain, "Oh, you say the good old days, but it wasn't good for everybody."
Right.
So how do you marry that with the steampunk idea or the steampunk fantasy? And I think somebody put it, and you might have seen it on that video I sent you, Randy, about how basically it's envisioning how you're hoping things would have turned out, or even envisioning it in a whole different setting.
Sure. Yeah.
So,
makes sense.
But so Steph, going forward, what more would you like to see from the steampunk culture, the steampunk culture?
I would like to see. I mean, personally, and it's kind of fun that we have found a way to incorporate it into what we're doing. I personally love the Western aspect. I love the apocalyptic wastelander aspect. And there's actually a pretty big cosplaying subculture for that. I mean, there are people that actually go out into the desert and have I don't want to say it's festivals, but I guess it kind of is, where they dressed in their wastelander clothing and they get together and they take amazing pictures. And I just think it's so cool looking. But you do see a large group of people that are at these events that are dressed in steampunk. I would love to see more of that. And now that we started talking about it, I want to see more steampunk horror. I would love to see that if done properly, so that it's not cheesy. That's the only thing is there, and it's not just steampunk, but there are like Burning Man.
Burning Man.
There are, yeah.
Steampunk is one of those genres or aesthetics that can easily sway into cheesy category. There's nothing wrong with cheesy, but there are some things that you can't do. Like horror is the best example. Don't really want to do cheesy because people are going to not be scared by it. They're just going to sit around with their friends and drink and laugh at it. Which, if that's what you're going for, then go for it. But I personally would love to see some darker. There's a lot of whimsy and fun to steampunk. I'd love to see some of the darker, more serious stuff. I think that would be cool and fun and different.
So can you guys hear me better now? I've rebooted my router, but I'm on my phone now, so I'm like, forget this. I'll do the phone this time.
Way better.
Way better.
So I don't know what you guys have talked about for the last 5 minutes, but now that Steph brings this up, one thing that we haven't talked about that actually fits into this is we did a one-shot issue between the Crossroads Conundrum and the arc that's coming up now, which is called The Perilous Prospects, called Nightmare Scenario. And in Nightmare Scenario, we did get to delve into some stuff that, Randy, it sounds kind of like you experienced in your time taking a vacation with COVID, where at the end of the Crossroads Conundrum, our main character finds himself in a pretty precarious position, not sure if he's going to live, if he's going to die, if he's somewhere in between. And he has an experience very similar to what you talked about. And we had people getting paying to get drawn in for zombie headshots, and he got to experience a kind of a horror world of his own. So yeah, we definitely tried to toe the line there, where there's nothing cheesy about what's in Nightmare Scenario. It's just a short little one shot. But we definitely got to experience some fun stuff that we never really did before in what we do, and that's bring some horror elements into and some zombies into our steampunk world.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, and zombies are kind of a common thing that you see sometimes, and I think they're probably the easiest, especially when you consider you're talking about the 1800s. You're looking at, or the 1900s. You're looking at, you have your snake oil salesmen, you have your occult religions. Cults were popping up all over the place, so it's really a prime time to have that kind of weird, exotic, and horrific stories.
Yeah. No, I agree with you, and I'm put in mind of like I read a book on the history of the creation of the television device, the TV set itself, and how like we have an electronic one. That's the one that is in every home now. But there was a mechanical one being created in Britain. So why couldn't we take like any sort of historical event and like maybe a TV that runs on steam? What if our doomsday device to end World War II was powered by steam instead of nuclear fission? I think it's just whatever the creator can come up with as far as an alternate history, or even the space race would provide all kinds of fodder. Imagine like an Apollo 13, and all of a sudden you've got this crazy inventor in the middle of the desert or wherever, living like the Unabomber, and he's, while NASA's kind of like got its hands tied, this is his chance to, pull the cord off of his, dusty old inventions and try to race to the moon to save them, sort of thing. So.
Right. Sarah says, I'm saying surround the building you're in with steampunk treadmills for the zombies.
Yeah, she had a great idea earlier about putting zombies on treadmills for energy.
I kind of wanted to show this. She's, Sarah said something about Burning Man, and steampunk has actually been pretty present at the Burning Man. What's really interesting about this culture is the do-it-yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, look at how that is. Look at how freaking cool that is.
You might not be a writer. You might not be a creator. You might not be an artist and the sense of pen and paper. But these people put together some amazing stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's seriously impressive. That's awesome.
That's cool. That is so cool.
see if I can pull this up.
Yeah, that is a very, very famous little steampunk house there. I love that thing.
And this is actually a mechanical park in France, where this is still, so it's out there. It's still alive. It's not just, one thing. It's a whole bunch of things. And what gets me is, like, you could see the gears and how this works, everything. This is inspiring, as opposed to, say, an iPhone where you can't see how anything works on the inside unless you take it apart. And then you take an iPhone apart, and that's it. It's over with.
There's a mechanical spider.
There's a mechanical spider. Yeah. So you could actually ride this thing. I probably wouldn't do that, but you could if you wanted to. But yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah, and this again, going back to the technological aspect of this. I always talk about creativity nowadays with the technology is democratizing the process. You don't have to know as much science, I don't think, to create something that runs on steam as you would something that runs on internal combustion or nuclear power, what have you. Right. That, you can get a lot more people putting on their thinking caps and maybe, creating more steam-powered devices because, we've got a lot more water than we may have petroleum at the moment, and it's certainly easier to get to. So,
yeah, absolutely. And this is just some of the cosplay that you see. The amount of work that goes into, cosplay, period, but what they end up doing with it. This right here, I don't even.
One of the things I love seeing is when people have the mechanical wings. They'll go to a steampunk show and they'll have like these mechanical wings. They'll hit a button and the things will come up behind them. We've seen them at quite a few shows we've been at. It's just like the amount of time it would take to build something like that just blows my mind.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah,
yeah, and talk about building something like that. There's your answer to the petroleum problem. It's just,
I'm there.
My gosh. That and that's the thing. I can't really put my finger on any other genre or culture. Of course, you had science fiction, but this fits right into science fiction.
It's absolutely really a part of it.
Out, into such a different niches and different corners.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, it's just a different form of technobabble, is all.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's amazing to see that even in the 1800s, they're still 1900s. 19th century is still inspiring us to this day. So I'll tell you what. Let's take a look at something else that's steampunk. I'll pull it up real quick. Let's see here. And of course, I hope there's no sound to this. Because I have no sound on here.
Oh, no, hey, look at that.
I like them.
There's a good looking website.
I know those people. Yeah, so that's our website. We try to cover everything that Steph and I both do because everything we do is under the Insymmetry Creations umbrella. You see the different titles we have there. We have our metal music. That the most recent album is Heirs of Isildur versus Tales from Nocturnia. Quick side note on that, we did some vinyl for that album, and the vinyl market I feel like is stuck in the 1800s. It takes forever to get vinyl created. It's taken us 6 to 8 months to get our vinyl pressed, and we finally just got word a couple days ago that our vinyl has finally gone to press. So if you're someone that ordered the vinyl, because we got splatter vinyl, different colored vinyl. If you're someone that ordered it, we're finally going to be getting those in, hopefully before the year 2029. So really soon. So we've got our title Misfits Clubhouse. That is all ages. That is on Scout Comics. We just were working with Richard, who is the head of Scoot today on the some of the different variations that'll be out there for the Scout version of issue 1 that should be out in technically less than a month in a comic book store near you. So we got Heirs of Isildur, which we've talked about quite a bit. The first arc is the Crossroads Conundrum. Then you have the bridge issue, which was Nightmare Scenario, and then we have the one that we're working on right now, which is the Perilous Prospects. And if you saw when I shared it today, I said we might have some news that you guys would be the first ones to hear. We haven't even sent this out to our backers yet. One of the things Steph and I have been doing intensely over the last couple of days and all the hours today, we're in the final editorial review on the full issue right now, 48-page perfect bound book. We are actually doing the final saves of all the pages right now for the printers. We're going to be having the entire issue out to the printer here imminently. What imminently means, who knows? It could be tonight, it could be tomorrow, it could be in a couple of days, but we are actually in that phase right now, being able to get the book out to the printer. So we're super stoked about that. You guys literally hear it here first, and dedicate that to BK Morris because we are on the show with you, buddy.
There you
Yay! The pleasure is all mine.
And then Tales from Nocturnia is medieval fantasy. Like we said, it is a spin-off from Heirs, but it is its own autonomous story that you don't have to read Heirs to be able to enjoy it. But it is it definitely is. It's a wild medieval fantasy story that is think World of Warcraft, Dungeons and Dragons, Game of Thrones, but then put a bent where you can see that it's actually attached into our steampunk time travel story as well. The people there just don't even know it.
All right. And of course, we can follow you on Facebook and Twitter at.
Facebook is /InSim. Twitter is at InSim Creations. And on Instagram, it is InSymmetry Creations as well.
All right. Let's take a look at you have some upcoming events.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm not sure on the upcoming events what we actually have on there. Let's see what we have there. Oh, you know what? I should have moved the Collective Con one off of there. But we've got I'm going to be at Brick City in Ocala at April 30th, which is a great little comic book show. And then Steph, do you want to tell them about Spookala or you want me to?
So Spookala is going to be in May, starts on Friday the 13th. It is a horror con. And it is put on, it's also in Ocala, Florida, which is Matt's hometown. And he works closely with the organizers there. And so he actually is the panel moderator for this show. He does panel moderating. He did it for Collective Con, which is the con that you see up above there. That was in March. And he will also do it and does do it yearly for Ocala Comic Con as well, which is also in Ocala, Florida. So Spookala this is the first year. And it is a horror con. I'm incredibly excited about it because I am very much a horror person. I do horror movie reviews and a lot of editorials and articles for several different websites. So it's right up my alley, near and dear to my heart. We are going to be there. We're going to have a table, but you are going to see Matt running back and forth between the table and moderating the panels, getting to interview all the awesome, amazing celebrities, which is a very, very cool gig that he gets to do.
All right. And of course, that's your shop.
And one thing we'll say about these upcoming appearances, we will be adding not one, not two, but 6 more appearances before the middle of June are going to get added onto here imminently.
Ooh, nice. Yes. Be busy. So what is the Misfit Clubhouse about? Give us some rundown. That I know it's not steampunk, but you said it's all ages.
Yeah, it's our all ages title. Yeah. It's got it's about 4 kids. 2 of them are humans, Miki and Stig, and 2 of them happen to be a fairy and a sloth. And we like to compare it to if Fairly Odd Parents and Gravity Falls, Wreck-It Ralph, if you kind of mash those all together. Matt likes to say if they were neighbors on a cul-de-sac, Misfits Clubhouse would be right next door. But however you want to look at it, it has that same feel to it. It's about a group of kids that they have their clubhouse, they have their little tree house, but they're not just in the tree house all the time. They do have adventures outside of the tree house, and it's kind of where their imaginations take them. Fun and adventure is limitless. That's why we like to say it. It's with Scout Comics imprint, all ages imprint, Scoot. And for our first issue is going to be debuting next month, we hope.
All right. So if somebody had to come here and get one thing to know what y'all are about, what would it be?
To get one thing to know what we're about, I think, honestly, I would say probably the one thing that you'd want to get right now is the Heirs of Isildur versus Tales from Nocturnia album, and here's why. Because That album has got 5 songs that attach to Heirs of Isildur. The first 3 songs are called The Perilous Prospects of Shadow's Haven, The Perilous Prospects of the Portals, and The Perilous Prospects of the Timekeeper. Those 3 songs are designed to be a summary of the lore and the universe of Heirs of Isildur, that you can actually go backwards and read the Crossroads Conundrum and really dig deep into that history, or you can go forwards and get into the Perilous Prospects and really get into the apocalyptic sci-fi that's going to happen in that title. Or you can look at the other 5 songs, which are all attached to Tales from Nocturnia, and the lyric sheet and the lyrics in the CD actually have little explanations at the bottom that talk about where those songs attach into the titles themselves. So that right there is a pretty good piece that will actually attach you to the different 2 of the different comic titles we have. That's what my answer would be.
Steph, would that be your answer too, or?
I would say, so when we wrote Nightmare Scenario, and it was described earlier, it's the bridge issue between both story arcs for Heirs of Isildur. If you're on the fence and thinking, I don't know, it sounds interesting, but I'm not quite sure what it's about, you can actually start with Nightmare Scenario, read it, and get enough of a sense of what the story's about, where it's going, and where it came from. And you can kind of decide what you want to do. You could read Nightmare Scenario and say, you know what, I want to read Perilous Prospects next and go forward with the story. I have enough of a sense of what already happened. Or you could say, I want to know more. I want to really dive deep into what these story arcs are about. And you could read Crossroads Conundrum and then move on to Perilous Prospects. So I feel like, and it's a shorter issue. It's a one shot. So it's a nice, good, safe place to start if you're a little overwhelmed by the thought of a trade and 11 issues and the next story arc.
Cool. So tell me about the Dragon Lord leather mask.
So that's something that I'm really glad you brought that up. So one of the big things that we always say is we want to make sure that we find ways to be able to bring the story outside of the pages of the book, so that way when you're done reading it and you put it on the shelf, the story doesn't disappear onto the shelf with the book itself. We have a leatherworking company called GB Leatherworks that does a lot of custom merch for us. And that Dragon Lord mask that you see there is actually associated with Tales from Nocturnia. We like to make sure that stuff like that is very meta, and you'll actually find one of the characters in Tales from Nocturnia actually wearing that mask in the issue. And so we have a trade paperback that's got the entire story arc there, and one of the characters actually does wear that mask and is the Dragon Lord himself. We did the same thing with our The Perilous Prospects campaign, where you've got a traveler's pouch, like a little D&D dice bag that actually has significance in the Heirs of Isildur lore that you're actually at some point going to see it in the story pages as well.
And he's really is that you behind the mask here, or?
That's actually a cosplayer that GB Leatherworks actually brought in, a guy that we know named
Matthew Bragg.
Yeah, Matthew Bragg, that's it. And when we actually debuted issue 3 of Tales from Nocturnia and the trade, we actually had booths at a Steampunk show, us beside GB Leatherworks, and Matthew Bragg was there as the Dragon Lord, dressed like that, all pimp daddied up with the mask. So we actually got to have him there as the Dragon Lord during the show, and we had a lot of people from Florida that got those leather dragon masks, and we actually got to give 4 of them to those people at the show. So we had this big photo shoot of all these people with their different Dragon Lord masks. So it was awesome.
Yeah, it was great.
Nice. I say
so as you can say, we like to like to do it all. We named ourselves In Symmetry Creations for a reason. We didn't want to just say In Symmetry Comics because we didn't want to like was stated earlier, we didn't want to pigeonhole ourselves. We didn't want to put ourselves in a corner where we are stuck only having to do one thing. And we want to, we're starting to get known now, not to toot our own horn or anything. We're starting to get known.
That's what you're here for. Do it. Toot your own horn.
But we're capitalizing on that. When we do our Kickstarters, people say to us now, what's the leather goods that your guys are going to have? What's the crazy thing that Matt and Steph are going to do? And we want that. That's what we want. We want people to be, looking forward to the next wild and crazy thing that we're going to do.
Cool. Awesome. Is there anything else you want me to show off?
You know what? I can show you one of the cool things about those Dragonlord masks is every time that GB makes one of those, they'll make it a little bit different each time. So we have one that's called the Murder Hornet variant. And this is actually the Murder Hornet variant of the Dragonlord mask I'm holding up right here. So as you can see, they've got the red and black. We actually had somebody in our most recent Kickstarter campaign pick this thing up. But yeah, they'll always do some kind of weird stuff like this or paint it green and yellow. So yeah, they do all kinds of crazy stuff for us. They did leather turntable covers that glowed in the dark for our Kickstarter for our album Kickstarter campaign. They do all kinds of stuff. We have some. The next 2 campaigns, we've got some ideas with them as well. So we have so much fun doing wild and crazy stuff that go along with our comics.
So Sarah says, all I have to say is goth duckbill platypus.
You know what's funny is I read that. Honestly, just wait. We are going to find a way to put that in something that we do at some point. It might be an Easter egg in the background, but it's a challenge, and we have done crazier Easter eggs than that. So we love to do stuff like that. So you never know. Might see it somewhere at some point in time.
So she is blown away. And seriously worth tooting your own horn with all your work. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So let me see here. I guess I'm going to pull up my special co-host's site here. Give me just a second. I know I need a producer back here, but
dang, I know if you only had one.
Yeah, right. Especially, I don't know if you noticed, but I knocked myself out the room earlier. So, Brian,
hey, that's me. Holy
sell
cats.
yourself, sir, please.
Well, unaccustomed as I am. Yes, we're Rising Tide Publications. We do comic books. We do mostly books. We write for ourselves and other people. And right there, we've got we also do broadcasting. We do 4 shows a week, aside from what guest shots we do. Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday at 10 a.m. We do Nevermind the Furthermore, an interactive conversation show. Thursday nights, we do Comic Book Spectrum, where I'm joined by 4 very wise people. And we review the latest comic books and talk about the industries and basically cut up for about an hour or 2. And shows, the next show I'm doing as of this recording is Saluki Con at the Student Center of Southern Illinois University in Carbondale, Illinois. And I got to fill that darn thing in. I got to get my webmaster to teach me how to do that. Anyway, we're going to be there, and we're going to have Ben Dunn of Antarctica Press will be there, plus some Power Rangers, along with some of my cronies that were even more fascinating, I think. And we're going to be doing talking about writing all weekend long, and or at least Saturday, because it's a Saturday only show because of the My Sharona Miley Cyrus. But let's see what else we got there. Also, we've got a monthly newsletter. The next issue is going out May 1st, and it's free to sign up for that thing. And we have videos in there. We share news views, and your information will never be sold, bartered, or traded with any other human being or otherwise on Earth or anywhere else. And also it has a link to my Patreon page, where we do a twice weekly blog called Every Blog Deserves a Name. And right now we are on the verge of, for $5 a month, you can read our latest book, a first draft flash fiction called The Terrors, and it's based on the old Nita Comics Black Terror, but with some twists to it. And I'm really excited to get that book out. We've got a really superb cover by Jeffrey Hayes coming out. And other than that, that's what I do. I sit around and I write all the time.
Well, what do you write? Let's talk about.
Well, I don't mind. Writing. Actually, I love talking about my writing.
Let's talk about your writing.
Yeah, okay, if you insist. No, my biggest seller is one called Santastein. It's based on the Mary Shelley book. Dr. Frankenstein has a cure for his fiance's holiday blues. What could possibly go wrong? I spent 180 pages telling you. And if you want to learn how to write and get scared at the same time, we've got the Haunting Scripts of Bachelor's Grove, where the first 40% is pretty much me telling you how I got into writing and how you can write comic scripts, and I give you 4 examples. And then the rest of it is short horror stories based on a real-life haunted cemetery in the Chicago suburbs, where I've had what we call weird crap happen to me. That's the technical term. And, of course, the original Skyman Battles Master of Steam behind this beautiful Pat Boyette cover. Introduction by comics icon Roy Thomas. His credits are actually longer than the introduction itself, but I'll take it. And it's basically a pre-World War II adventure where the Nazi in steam-driven armor has captured the great scientists of North America, and only the two-fisted science detective Skyman can save him as he's being hunted by the FBI for the murder of his alter ego. And also we've got Volcana, my series book, which we're writing the sequel to this year. Angelique Forge is a blogger who has discovered the armor of Vulcan. And how many times can a girl die before the end of the world? That's what the question we have there. Plus, I do stuff for other companies. Right now, for Crazy 8 Press and Becky Books, I'm in 2 of the 3 books here, covering the 3 seasons of the Batman television show. Ask for these titles by name. Part of my job involves watching Batman reruns. Pray for me. But anyway, these are available right now. And also Snow Shorts, which if you like quick read crime drama, I've got a story in here called Snow Ambition. Abraham Snow is a former deep undercover agent. And one day he's walking through an airport and he is called by name by the alias he used that was supposed to have died a couple of years ago. And if he gets involved in this crazy scheme to get involved with this international crime lord again, his family could, if he doesn't do it, his family could die. If he does go along with it, he could die for real. Ambition can be a killer. So that's going on. And actually, I'm very proud. In about a month or so, the Pulp Factory Awards will be given. It's for new pulp writing, and my Snow Ambition is up for best short story of the year.
Cool.
So
awesome! Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, the only other award I have is for not murdering a stage director. So
that's a very important award.
It was hard earned too. Let me tell you.
Especially if you're that stage director.
That's true.
All right, and I will throw this up here because we are all about shameless self-promotion. Randy, you want to tell them about this? We saw the Kickstarter. This is still an Indiegogo, huh?
Yeah, they extended it for another 30 days over on Indiegogo. It's the Long Shots campaign. 7 publishers, 9 books, one big deal. And you can get all 9 of these books that you see here on your screen. God's Hand, HeroBot Zero, Hybrids, Only Death Can Save Us, Oswald Chronicles, Revolt, Interceptor, Tall Tales, and Wellkeeper for the low price of $25 plus shipping. And all of the books are incredibly pretty. They're the best printed books I've ever been associated with. The publisher, the printer that did it's the first time that they ever printed comics, and they stuck 3 staples on the spine instead of 2, just for extra care. And it's just beautiful paper on the inside, all sorts of different genres, originally meant for a deal to go out to a large retail chain that we find out later never really existed. But we've got multiple copies of the book, so we're offering it in the Long Shots campaign, as well as the Fellowship of the Indies over on Kickstarter right now. All 9 books, $25.
All right. Let me show just real quick. We're not the only show.
And I should point out that all of those properties in the Long Shots and the Fellowship of the Indies campaign aren't going away just because the deal went south. So this isn't the only exposure you're going to see, but it's a great introduction to all 9 properties.
All right.
Sorry.
Of course,
go ahead.
that's all right. No, of course, I want to point out that we're not the only fantastic show on the Raging Network. So check out our mini shows that we have. Raging 2, of course, Dispatches, Eagle Works with Daphne Lage, of course, Zimcast tomorrow night, Nerd Bacon Thursday morning, and, of course, Radio Show Sunday Funnies. on JD Calderon's Talking Comics on Sunday. Not to mention, we haven't updated the card yet, but Sketchy Saturday with Marv V and Mike Jimmy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you got to be on that show Saturday. Huh? You were the first guest.
Yeah, well, I wasn't. I think Peter Palmiotti was really the first guest. I was just kind of popped in and sat there and drew along with him. But also over on the Raging 2 network, if you get a chance to go over there on YouTube, go over there, like and subscribe that network. There's another playlist over there of classic Sunday Funnies stories, interviews, episodes, I should say. We just posted the third classic episode like a day or two ago. Daphne did it. And it's an interview that Daphne and I had with the great Trina Robbins. And if you don't know who Trina Robbins is, you need to know who Trina Robbins is. You need to go over there and take a look. It's really a fantastic interview. Most of it was by Daphne, who was getting to know Trina face to face for the first time. So she starts out a little, I won't say intimidated, but she knew who Trina Robbins was when she started talking to her. And it just turned into a really relaxed conversation about Trina's role in comics, not just the underground movement, but in the mainstream movement. That's over at Classic Sunday Funnies over on the Raging 2 network. There's 2 other shows up there as well. One is an interview with underground great Dan Fogel, who does Fogel's Guides for Underground Comics. And the first one up there is an interview with Ralph Griffith, the late Ralph Griffith, I should say, and Stuart Kerr, who are the founders of Arrow Comics back in 1985. All of them are great interviews I'm really proud to have been a part of. So go over there and take a look.
Excellent. So, Steph, where can we find you?
Aside from the InSim social media and websites, I am on Facebook, Steph Cannon. I am on Twitter, S Cannon, and on Instagram, I'm Steph Cannon Writes.
All right. Matt, tell them where we can find you.
The best place to look for me, like I said, is at the Insymmetry Creations sites, or you can look at Dr. Anguish on Twitter and on Instagram. But like I said, most of the time, the easiest way to get me is to go through the InSim socials, and you'll get a hold of me.
You can also find my movie reviews and articles on creepykingdom.com, horrorgeeklife.com, and horrorbuzz.com. And I also have 2 articles that I've done for Fangoria as well.
Sweet.
Right. Excellent. Nice. Excellent.
That is awesome.
Mr. Brian K. Morris, sir, tell us where we can find you, sir.
Mostly on Facebook, risingtide.pub, and also my YouTube channel, Brian K. Morris Rising Tide. So please come look for me and subscribe, share, and like. And then once you do that, do the same thing for Raging 2. I insist.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Randy?
Yeah, you can find me mostly on Facebook. The Zimcast is on tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Sunday Funnies at 9 a.m. on Sundays, Eastern Standard Time. If you keep, also the Long Shots and the Fellowship of the Indies campaigns, Fellowship of the Indies over on Kickstarter, Long Shots over on Indiegogo. But if you keep your eyes open, eventually I will have a sign-up page for the book that I'm working on now when I'm not swamped with commercial work. Thank goodness I'm back to work. But I'm working on a book of my COVID experiences. That'll be a combination prose, pictures, and comics. So
I want pictures of that.
It's still in my head, like as if it just happened yesterday. So it was really crazy. I had a lot of crazy dreams while I was under. I had a lot of learning experiences. There's nothing that can really compare to waking up and not being able to move. Especially after losing 6 weeks of time, waking up, not being able to move, and having to go through all of the physical therapy. I want to cover all of that into a book. And right now, the tentative title is My Life Under the Protocols with COVID. That's what I'm calling it.
Awesome.
And when I was under, as soon as I could start moving, as soon as I was able to move my hands, move my arms, I asked for pencil and paper, and I started drawing because comics and art have always kept me grounded and sane. that and my fantastic wife. So as soon as I could draw, I was drawing. I shocked the physical therapist. I drew a cartoon dog right off the bat, and they were stunned. It's still real shaky. But over a period of weeks, I finally got my hand-eye coordination back and I got some really great cartoons from it, really unbelievable experiences. So I can't wait to share them with you. So keep looking for that. There'll be a sign-up sheet as soon as I think I get close enough to having a definite release date on the book.
All right.
Hopefully by the end of this month, maybe by the end of next month at the latest.
I'm looking forward to it.
Fingers crossed.
All right. Of course, I'm C Michael Lanning. You can find me at my link tree, which has all my Facebook, Twitter, and all that other stuff. Find me here next week, same time, same place, where we will be talking time travel with our good friend Russ Leach.
Sweet.
So come and check that out.
Let's talk about the science.
Yes. Oh, hey, let's do it. Hopefully, we'll have our scientist back then and see what he has to say.
Oh, he's been displaced at least a couple of times.
I'm sure. There's probably stuff that he's not privileged to say.
Just like today, we have no idea where in the time stream Stone is.
That's right.
None whatsoever.
So anyway, of course, join us tomorrow night for Zimcast, where we'll be ranting.
News and opinion. We're going to talk about some heritage auction stuff. We're going to talk about some other stuff that's happening in comics right now and giving out our professional, opinionated opinion.
There you go. So I will leave you with a little bit more steampunk before we go. And good night, everybody.
See ya.
See ya.